Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's IPA virtual training. Welcome also to my EMA colleagues for being online and ready to give the training. So, is everybody in, please? Yep. So I'll kick off. My name is Martin Harvey. I've not had the opportunity to meet you before. I wanted to introduce myself. You may have known that Agnès Sarraimont retired at the end of September, and I've been fortunate enough to be appointed as her successor as head of international affairs, which means that one of the joys of my new role is to work alongside Ricardo and the team as we go through the IPA program. So it is something that I'm aware of and is rather important to what we're doing in the international affairs team. So I'm happy to be here with you today and to welcome you to what is the last webinar of 2021. And this is the project sponsored by the Instrument for Pre-Accession Assistance of the European Union, for which the EMA is running this program. So as we all know, this is the end of a rather complicated and challenging year on so many fronts. But we have been able to deliver, I think at the last count, 11 webinars in 2020, and just one less than that, 10 in 2021. And we've covered quite a range of topics. And we've also tried to pitch these, as I hope you've been able to feel, at different levels, some at quite advanced levels and some at more introductory, initial basic levels. And we've had a lot of colleagues from the European Medicines Agency and across the whole of the medicine network, so the experts from the national agencies. So a lot of people have been involved in these training. I hope that they have been of use to you and helped give you the foundation. The other thing we're all discovering is the joys of holding virtual meetings. I have to say that I still have trouble unmuting myself when I double mute. It's still difficult sometimes to raise questions and participate. I really would encourage you, so I hope we're getting used to it, to use the opportunity to raise your hand, ask questions to the experts, the colleagues on the call today. That's what they're here for. As you probably will know of your experience of the virtual conferences, there is nothing more boring than talking to a wall of silence. So please do use the opportunity, raise your hand, ask the questions in the chat. And Ricardo in a moment will just walk you through the process for doing that. This is supposed to be an interactive engagement, not a university lecture. So please do ask the questions. Before I hand over, I just want to say that we are planning a program of webinars in 2022. Initially, they will be virtual, as we have had to do for 2020 and 2021, but we are hoping to be able to finally do some in-person training in 2022. And we very much look forward to meeting you face-to-face, and for an opportunity for me to meet somebody for the first time, and for Ricardo and the team to re-find old friends. So I just want to end by saying thank you to Giovanna, Maria, Marin for contributing and doing today's course. And of course, I couldn't finish without saying thank you to Sandra Gogo, Clément Lagalis, and Riccardo Luigetti, who have worked so hard during the year to actually deliver the trainings. So I leave you in their hands, and please ask them questions. This is really your opportunity, and I would encourage you to do that. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the next training.
Thank you very much, Martin. We will start in a minute, really as quick as possible, as we don't have that much time. But very quickly, I would also like to welcome everyone to this training. As Martin said, this is the last one for 2021. Next year, we will have more. I have already received quite a lot of suggestions from you on what we should organize trainings next year. So, and hopefully, as Martin said, we will have finally face-to-face meetings next year, depending, of course, on the situation, or otherwise we will continue as we have done. But we hope actually to go back to normal, or at least a little bit more normal. So without wasting any more time, I would like to introduce Maria Giovanna Satta, Maria Santos, who are the speakers today, and Marin Bonovac, who is another panelist. You know them already because they have delivered actually the risk management plan training in April. They're all working in the human unit here at EMA. They're the best risk management specialists we have. And in April, they introduced you to the risk management plans. Today, this is about case studies, so going to more practical details and at a bit more advanced level. So we can start. As Martin said, please mute your microphones while you're not speaking. This will help with a smooth running of the training. And also, anytime during the presentations, you can use the chat function in the system, and you can put questions there. Maybe they won't be answered immediately, but we will take the questions in the chat during the question and answer session. And of course, you can raise your hand in the system, and we can see that you want to say something. With this, I just want to thank you, the speakers. This is really a very, very busy time, and they have kindly done it. It was hard, and I think they deserve our big thank you. With this, I give the floor to Maria Giovanna as the first speaker. Thank you very much, Maria Giovanna.
Good morning, everyone. Riccardo, thank you for the nice introduction. My pleasure to be here today to speak with you about the key points of what is really a long story about Valproate. This is a product I started to follow at the beginning of 2017. And if I can have the next slide, I would like to discuss with you the key points of a process to strengthen the risk minimization measure for what is known as a very effective products. However, there are safety concerns that are closely monitored and for which a set of intervention has been put in place. So if I can have the next slide, please. I would like to give you a few words about this product, which is quite old. In fact, in Europe, it was licensed since 1967 to treat different types of epilepsy. And since 1995 for bipolar disorder, particularly manic episodes. In some member states, it is also indicated for the prophylaxis of migraine. Worldwide, it is approved in 120 countries. So, a very old product, effective, its mechanism of action is not yet fully understood. It is thought that Valproate acts by reinforcing the GABA pathways or reducing the excessive electrical brain activity via inhibition of sodium voltage channels. What we know for sure. Side effects, particularly dose-dependent adverse effects in prenatally exposed offsprings, were firstly reported in the early 80s. However, the magnitude of the risk of major and minor congenital malformation became clear only after 2010. Today we have adequate data about the consequences of Valproate exposure in utero. Let me mention a few potential side effects. So, exposure in utero might lead to neural tube defects, facial dysmorphism, cleft lip and palate, craniostenosis, cardiac, renal, urogenital defects, multiple other abnormalities. So not only physical, but also mental consequences in the exposed children. There has been evidence of ADHD, autism spectrum disorder. The exact gestational period of major risk for these effects could not be established. Also, a risk throughout the whole pregnancy can't be excluded. Therefore, what can be done to minimize all these safety concerns to avoid exposure during pregnancy while this effective product is still administered to treat serious long-term debilitating conditions? I would like to give you some background information to understand particularly what has been happening in the last 3 years. Very briefly, a referral procedure with a focus on efficacy was triggered in April 2009. I would like not to focus on the outcome of such referral in terms of efficacy, which was, as outlined in this slide, a restriction of use for the treatment of manic episodes when lithium is contraindicated or not tolerated, and a continuation of treatment to be considered only in patients who responded well to Valproate. If I can have the next slide, I would like to outline the wording including in the CHMP assessment report and among all PI updates, what was noted in SMPC section 4.6. So, the potential for delayed intellectual development was identified. It was recommended for Valproate not to be used unless safer alternatives proved to be ineffective or not tolerated. Also, women of childbearing potential strongly recommended to use effective contraception. If I can have the second slide. About 4 years later, next slide, please. Thank you. About 4 years later, in October 2013, a second referral procedure was triggered. In this case, the focus was on safety, with a special focus on female children, women of childbearing potential, pregnancy. The UK raised concern about new information about in utero exposure, outlining nature and a greater magnitude of a risk of neurodevelopmental abnormalities and autism spectrum disorders, further clarified, characterized a greater magnitude of Valproate in comparison to other antiepileptic. So, it was necessary to reevaluate the impact on Valproate benefit-risk profile and see whether at union level PI updates were deemed necessary for the risk minimization measure to be put in place. At that point, Valproate efficacy was reevaluated and still confirmed. Valproate was noted as an effective drug for the treatment of epilepsy, manic episodes in bipolar disorder. Valproate was considered as an option to remain for female patients, but again, reserved for situations where other treatments have not been successful. A first contraindication was considered for the treatment of migraine, for the prophylaxis, apologies, of migraine. Valproate was contraindicated in pregnancy, in women of childbearing potential, not use effective contraception, in light of limited data on its efficacy in such indication and sufficient therapeutic alternatives to prevent acute migraine attacks. So, if I can have the next slide, please. At that time, in addition to PI updates, PRAC recommended a set of additional risk minimization measures, which are listed here. An healthcare professional guide was introduced, a patient booklet, an acknowledgement risk form to complement the healthcare professional guide, including a checklist, which the prescriber could take into account at the time of looking at the best treatment for a patient, for example, in case of epilepsy, in case of bipolar disorder. A Dhpc was introduced to highlight the latest development, the referral outcome. And in order to evaluate the effectiveness of such risk minimization measure, PRAC required all MAH to conduct a drug utilization study. This was a category 1 study, imposing the framework of the referral to not only assess the effectiveness of the risk minimization measures listed in this slide, but also to evaluate the prescribing pattern of Valproate in routine clinical practice, whether further to the referral and the new measures, better adherence to Valproate condition of use were noticed. In some member states, further risk minimization measures were introduced. For example, a warning text and a pictogram and symbol on Valproate outer packaging. Further Dhpcs were disseminated, and a patient card was also introduced. So, if I can have the next slide. What happened next? 2 years down the line, member states such as France, where Valproate was highly prescribed, started to express again serious concern. A high level of Valproate exposure persisted in France, with limited adherence to the prescribing condition, in accordance with the outcome of the second referral procedure. So, despite all risk minimization measures implemented, despite all the awareness, what was noted? France performed a PASS, a study in all Valproate indication and national level, reviewing data of medical administrative databases. They also conducted a survey in community pharmacies between April and June 2016. Let me start with the survey. Still, a remarkable level of exposure among women of childbearing potential was noted. The prescribing condition, the adherence to the prescribing condition of Valproate, well, according to pharmacists who dispense the product, for the treatment of bipolar disorder, there was an adherence to the fact that Valproate should not be prescribed as a first-line treatment only in the 36% of prescription. And for bipolar disorder, we were looking at around 50%. So, in a nutshell, it looked like the educational materials, the measures put in place, did not reach the targeted audience, healthcare professional and patients, in a satisfactory rate, timely, effectively, to trigger a significant impact on Valproate prescription. Valproate was still used, for example, in women of childbearing potential without effective contraception, cases of pregnancies in patients under Valproate treatment were still noted. A good number of patients had not received educational materials. French concern was supported by data from the UK. Some member states expressed a lack of effectiveness for the risk minimization measures. It was noted that more awareness about Valproate teratogenicity was needed. The knowledge among patients particularly was considered limited. And what was also mentioned in the surveys, in the analysis, in the feedback of member states, many times the patients were not receiving the educational material. However, those who recalled to have received it, and for example, the healthcare professional who read the Dhpc, Obviously, they had a better awareness, the better knowledge on valproate prescribing condition. They actually reacted positive toward these materials. So this was a key element. When the material were received, they were effective. So there were barriers in receipt of such materials. Therefore, if I can have the next slide, it could be quite intuitive what happened next. So if I can have the following one, what PRAC did, what was necessary to be done, further reevaluate valproate benefit risk profile. A third referral procedure was deemed necessary based on evidence of lack of awareness, lack of knowledge about the risk minimization measure. This third referral procedure was on the same safety matter of the second. Again, a focus on women of childbearing potential, pregnancy. This procedure was started in March 2017, was triggered by France. And as you can see in this slide, a very detailed list of questions was posed to all MAHs of valproate in all authorized indication for all formulation across Europe in order to gain data from any source, any stakeholder, to further reevaluate the benefit risk profile and ultimately decide what to do for a very effective treatment to avoid, to minimize, reduce as much as possible exposure during pregnancy. What can I say? There was a high level of response when this referral was initiated, and all the MAHs, majority of the MAHs came together. They created a consortium and they provided detailed response. The public reacted very positive and requested to be engaged, healthcare professionals, learned societies. So if I can have the next slide. As I said, this was quite a referral with a high level of public interest. And in such regards, I would like to pause for a moment and to ask you a question. A set of meetings, of initiatives that took place in the framework of this referral. And I would like to ask you specifically if you know what was held at EMA for the first time in September 2019.
We have started a slide. If you don't know how it works, you might have used it before. But just scan the barcode with your mobile, and you will be able to give us an answer. And we'll see if the results should come, but you have to scan it with your mobile. The barcode. Yeah, okay. At the moment, yeah, Mariana.
Okay, so we can look at the next slide. Yes, the first EMA public hearing, the first time ever for such an event. If you are interested, you might still watch the recording of such event. The full recording is available on EMA website. So a very powerful event with all stakeholders coming together, many requests for people to attend, and very strong messages all taken on board by PRAC when drafting the outcome of such a referral procedure. What was asked? First of all, more, if I can have the next slide. Thank you very much. What was asked? more evidence, more clinical guidance on valproate use, specifically with regards to discontinuation, switching of the treatment. For example, for a patient with epilepsy who has been treated since childhood, and maybe the patient is in his 30s, late 30s, and is willing to have a baby. So what to do in terms of switching to another treatment, which could be all the options the patient can take into account for an informed decision. The public advocated also clear, complete information at the right time to the right recipient. They stated the educational material were very powerful. They had to be updated and disseminated accordingly. Probably the strongest messages for PRAC was a support, a public willingness for a visual reminder on valproate outer packaging in order to reach, for example, even patients with limited literacy who might perhaps pose a question just by seeing a symbol on the outer box. It was also asked for an update of the educational material in order to obtain age-appropriate information, taking into account the long-term treatment of valproate at a different point in life of a patient. It was also advocated by different stakeholders a more coordinated healthcare service at national level to ensure, when possible, individualized care plans. An enhanced roles of different stakeholders, and particularly what was emphasized, a key role of the pharmacist. Few pharmacist representatives came to speak at the public hearing and asked for tools to engage with the patients. They asked for training in order to play their role, ensure the message was disseminated at a very important time when the medicine was dispensed. If I can have the next slide, thank you. This is quite a busy one, where I wanted to compare the risk minimization measure set up in the framework of the second referral versus all the updates that were agreed by PRAC in the framework of the third referral. First of all, a very clear advocated contraindication in pregnancy and women of childbearing potential unless the condition of a stringent pregnancy prevention program are not met. So a contraindication was already in place for the prevention of migraine. A contraindication was confirmed for the treatment of manic episodes in bipolar disorder. A contraindication was confirmed also for the treatment of epilepsy, with one exception. In case of idiopathic or genetic generalized epilepsy, which is a complex disorder affecting approximately 1/3 of epileptic patients. And among those, there is a niche population, about not more than 20% of them, who respond well only with valproate. Therefore, it is not possible for them to discontinue all the treatment at any time. Let me pause for a moment on the stringent condition of the PPP, which I have summarized in the next slide. I would like to firstly discuss with you all the educational materials. First of all, let me mention that valproate treatment, taking into account all PI updates performed, valproate treatment should be initiated and supervised by a specialist. Valproate was clearly highlighted couldn't be used in female children and in women of childbearing potential as first-line treatment, should be prescribed and dispensed in accordance with the stringent pregnancy prevention program. Valproate should be prescribed in monotherapy at the lowest effective dose, if possible, as a prolonged release formulation, with the daily dose divided at least in 2 single doses. Aside for that, this information had to be captured in an updated healthcare professional guide, where the condition of the PPP are explained, all the requirements that the specialist should take into account before prescribing valproate to the patient, as I just mentioned. The healthcare professional guide should be complemented by a risk acknowledgement form, which should be filed, should be considered at least annually at the time of the specialist reassessment of the treatment, having an informed discussion with the patient. The annual risk acknowledgement form contains a checklist for prescriber to remind them all the questions they should ask. They should really look at each patient case by case, ensuring they have understood the necessity for effective contraceptions. They are not planning a pregnancy. The risk acknowledgement form is specifically mentioned as an element of the PPP, should be used at treatment initiation during each annual review, and in some member states, it is required for the patient to sign this form as an evidence that a discussion about valproate treatment, the benefit and the risk has happened with the specialist, that the patient has understood and has understood the risk, the teratogenicity of the product, what to do to avoid it, and the patient is in agreement for such treatment. Let me mention the signature of this form is a matter prac-reverted for the attention of member states. Why? Because the signature has not legal value in some member states, for example, the Nordic countries. And of course, the fact that the patient is signing the form does not mean in any way is waiving any of his rights. Also, an updated patient guide was put in place. It needed to be distributed from the prescriber to the patient, the carer. And this was an updated document with age-appropriate information. There are subsections depending on each valproate indication, and the language is tailored for each patient at any time during his life to be able to understand it. A Dhpc was again disseminated, and there was the introduction of a patient card. This tool had been considered previously in member states such as France with very positive result. First of all, the usefulness of the card was emphasized at the public hearing and also at the stakeholder meeting. This was noted as a document brief, clear, concise, providing information about the benefit and the risk of valproate, the need of effective contraception throughout the whole treatment. It included a reminder for an annual reassessment, advised not to discontinue valproate, and prompt contact the specialist when planning a pregnancy or if the patient is pregnant suddenly. And of course, each patient should avoid the self-decision to discontinue valproate treatment without discussing with the specialist. This card was a tool also to support the pharmacist. In fact, it was agreed for the patient card to be attached to Valproate outer packaging. Why? To ensure the patient receives the card each time the product is dispensed. Also, this card is removable, and at the time of dispensing, it can be a trigger for a discussion between the pharmacist and the patient based on the succinct information, the key information included in the card, to ensure there is awareness, there is knowledge about valproate teratogenicity. Another key element advocated by the public, the visual reminder. The visual reminder, the PRAC agreed for a warning text to be included in the outer packaging and considered the option of a pictogram of a symbol to be reverted for member state attention. Why? Because it was felt that differences across member state, cultural, socioeconomic, might have an impact on the chosen pictogram. Few options were presented by PRAC, and ultimately it was decided each member state to consider if a pictogram could complement the warning text and which pictogram among the options considered. So if I can have the next slide, please. Here we have the elephant in the room, the key elements of the pregnancy prevention program. So a set of stringent intervention tools, including educational ones, aimed at minimize pregnancy exposure at any time during valproate treatment. As I said, initiation and supervision of the treatment performed by a specialist. The prescriber must assess female patients for the potential of becoming pregnant. The decision to initiate valproate should be an informed consent one. The patient should be involved, the individual circumstances to be detailed, and the patient, it should be ensured the patient has clearly understood each pros and cons of valproate treatment. The prescriber also, the specialist, has to assess the potential for the pregnancy in all female patients ahead of starting treatment via a pregnancy test, which should be repeated, the PRAC stated, as needed while treatment is ongoing. Detailed information via a verbal communication, via provision of the patient guide should be provided. Counseling about which are the options for effective contraception should also be discussed. The risk acknowledgement form to be taken into account. The treatment also should be reviewed annually by the specialist. An immediate consultation if pregnancy is planned or if the pregnancy occurs. If I can have the next slide. Thank you. I would like to pause for a moment and pause with the theory and share with you some practice. This is an example of a visual reminder on the outer packaging. The source of information is the Irish Health Authority website. This was chosen as convenient. It was in English. However, you might notice different examples of electronic dissemination in health authorities, in different health authorities' websites across member states. Here you have a visual reminder composed of a pictogram and a warning text. The pictogram, you might notice, is the one initially implemented by France. It was considered one of the favorite, one of the most popular. Particularly, the innovator MAH for Valproate across different member states performed an international user study to confirm whether the symbol selected was understood, whether the message was quite intuitive. So you can see here, the information is succinct, the text is quite powerful, and it was confirmed by the patient selected. The pictogram complements and contribute to the information aimed at being disseminated. If I can have the next slide, please. Very quickly, I've told you about all that has been implemented by PRAC in the third referral. Would you consider any other measure? Would you implement anything else at, perhaps in your country? So a quick question with you, with a look at the clock.
Please use Lido. Or if someone wants to speak, is also possible, of course.
Don't be shy, unless you oblige us to share with you the next slide with a few suggestions.
You can also use the chat, of course, if you want to answer this question in the chat. Okay.
Perhaps in the interest of time, shall I give them an answer?
Yes, please.
Okay, so if I can have the next slide. Here I have summarized examples of additional tools that were implemented in Ireland. I'd like to flag for your attention a reduced pack size of up to 30 units, which is available in Ireland to mitigate the need for broken bulk dispensing at pharmacy level, which is also common in the UK. Also, this was done to ensure the patient received the package leaflet on the outer carton and on the package leaflet and the patient card included on the outer carton, and as a look at the visual reminder. Also, Ireland implemented a pictogram on the blister on the primary packaging. This was discussed by PRAC. What was considered that the symbol might be too small, therefore PRAC decided to revert the matter for member state attention. Ireland implemented a pharmacy poster to outline the key points of the PPP, a warning sticker, and a shelf marker. So quite a detailed set of additional measures, together with further Dhpc disseminated, redistribution of the educational material, availability of such materials on the Irish Health Authority website. If I can have the next slide, please. We are toward the end of my presentation. I've captured here a few updates on evaluation of the effectiveness of the risk minimization measures. First of all, a drug utilization study, a category 1 study, is currently ongoing. The results are highly awaited in 2024. This would be a retrospective database study in 5 EU member states, comparing the level of knowledge, awareness of Valproate risk minimization measure, Valproate risk, before and after the measures implemented within the third referral procedure. And this study is complemented with a cross-sectional multinational survey among healthcare professionals and patients. Again, a Category 1 study imposed by PRAC in the framework of the third referral. This has already been completed, and evaluation of the data is ongoing, so watch the space. This was a web questionnaire looking at 6 different specialties in terms of healthcare professional, also addressed to the patients. Then, very briefly, I have captured here the results of 2 other studies which are publicly available. A survey conducted by the Epilepsy Society in Ireland and a summary of an EMA commissioned study. What can be said in a nutshell about both studies? There is an enhanced awareness of valproate teratogenicity among patients and healthcare professionals as a result of the third referral and all the measures put in place. Together with high awareness, let's say that there is still room for improvement on the use of educational materials. Also, materials have been better distributed. They have reached the patient toward different channels, and obviously it is awaited to see whether there is a desired impact on ultimately adherence to the prescribing condition of valproate. If I can have the next slide. So, my last slide for now. What can we say? Valproate is a very effective product. It remains a topic of major public interest. Valproate is a key example of a risk-based approach triggering strengthening of the risk minimization measure as soon as its safety concerns have been further identified, characterized. The PPP is a cornerstone for other products. Age-appropriate information, tailored language has been put in place. Obviously, continuous benefit-risk profile and effectiveness of the risk minimization measure evaluation. Here you have the PRAC motto. They want to ensure, with what has been done up to now, that the right medicine is prescribed to the right patient with the right dosage and at the right time. So what can I say more? Valproate is a patient-tailored story, for sure to be continued. And I would pause here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria Giovanna, for the wonderful presentation. I mean, if I may make a comment, this is a story where a very difficult situation actually brought a lesson that can be used in other situations. We had the EMA had the first public hearing, and now public hearings are held from time to time when there is the need. So let's say it was very difficult, but there is a legacy for the future, a positive legacy for the future, I think. What do you think, Maria Giovanna?
Indeed. Yes, it was quite incredible how the public, how any stakeholder from the MAHs, from the lung societies, anybody wished to participate. I would recommend to follow the public hearing, the full recording. It is still available because it was incredibly powerful and somehow is had a major impact on the PRAC outcome. The public strongly looked for a visual reminder, and the practice debated it for a really long time. When the public said we want it, this is a powerful immediate element on the outer packaging, the PRAC said, fine, this is what the public is advocating, we need to listen to them. So all the stakeholders together for a relevant, a major process. Incredible, I would say.
Okay, thanks again. This was really a beautiful presentation, in my opinion. Is there any question now that we can take before we go to the next presentation? Okay, if not, I'm pleased to give the floor to Maria Escudero for the second presentation of the day. Thank you, Maria, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Ricardo, and good morning, colleagues. I hope you can hear me well. So taking the tone of what Ricardo just mentioned, that Valproate was indeed a major milestone, if we can call it as such. And after that, all the others that followed were based on it. We wanted to present another example of a case study, which in this case is Gilenya, and then fingolimod for the following generics, where indeed we also looked at a product with a high teratogenic risk, not as high as Valproate, and it was very good that in a sense we had that comparator to make the link to. So if I can have the next slide, please, just to introduce you to the product. So fingolimod is a sphingosine-1 phosphate receptor modulator, indicated as a single disease-modifying therapy in highly active relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis in the following groups of adult patients and pediatric patients. So for this case, in case of fingolimod, at the time of marketing authorization, we already had animal studies showing reproductive toxicity, including fetal loss and organ defects. And we knew that the receptor affected by fingolimod was involved in vascular formation during embryogenesis. So if I can have the next slide, please. At the time of marketing authorization approval, we already had in the RMP, in the risk management plan, reproductive toxicity as an important identified risk. We had pharmacovigilance activities to further characterize this risk, and these were both routine, so data to be collected in the PSURs and reviewed in this remit, but also additional measures, additional activities, such as the fingolimod pregnancy exposure registry, which the aim was to collect outcomes of data from babies born to women treated with fingolimod and then compare it to our general surveillance systems. In terms of risk minimization measures, we had also both routine and additional. So as routine, we had already included in section 4.6 of the summary of product characteristics that females should practice effective contraception during treatment and for 2 months post-drug discontinuation, and that they should ensure they're not pregnant at the time of treatment starts. And if they do become pregnant, then we would recommend that Gilenya is discontinued. For the additional educational materials, we had a patient reminder card that would outline the known risks for fingolimod, as well as explain the need and importance to avoid a pregnancy, and also a physician's checklist, so that at the time the patient was prescribed fingolimod, there could already be an interaction with the physician to explain the high teratogenic risks that had been identified with the product. So if I could have the next slide. And as you know, as time progresses, data continues to be collected. We don't stop data collection at the time of marketing approval. And so triggered by reviews coming for post-marketing reports, there was evidence that the risk of fingolimod for infants born to mothers that were treated with this product during pregnancy was twofold increased of major congenital malformations compared then with the rate that was observed in the general population. And here we use the EuroCat, so the European Network of Population-Based Registry, to make the comparison. So taking into account this evidence and also our EMA guidance on the risk assessment of medicinal products on human reproduction and lactation, in case a suspected or demonstrated malformative risk, we should consider a contraindication. So if I could have the next slide, and I will pause here, just if anyone is brave enough to try to have a go of what we think should be done, considering this evidence, and then what we have done. So I'll pause here for a brief couple of seconds to see if we have anyone who wants to risk it.
Anyone who wants to contribute, to give
also you, Ricardo, if you want to give it a go, please do. You know the answer exactly. You cannot.
I can't, but yeah, it would be good if, I mean, really, this is not a judgment or anything. There will be no judgment or anything. It's just an occasion to participate and see what ideas you can give, and then we will compare to what actually has been done in practice. But okay, I don't see anything coming.
Okay, we can
at least. So
we continue and then we come back.
Please.
No problem. So if I could have the next slide, please. So what we considered was indeed amendments to the product information. So a contraindication was introduced in pregnant women and women of childbearing potential not using effective contraception, with a warning in 4.4 and then cross-reference also to 4.6. So we updated also the existing educational materials, and we introduced a pregnancy-specific patient reminder card, similar to what Maria Giovanna have just presented for Valproate. So the key messages here were for both for women before and during treatment, and also if a woman becomes pregnant. So in terms of women of childbearing potential, we should ensure there is counseling before treatment initiation and regularly, that an effective pregnancy test result is available before treatment initiation and then repeated at suitable intervals. We should ensure effective contraception is used during treatment and for 2 months after treatment discontinuation. We should ensure that Gilenya treatment is stopped 2 months before planning a pregnancy. And if a woman wants to become pregnant while on treatment, we should discontinue treatment. If, in fact, the woman becomes pregnant, we should ensure she has counseling, close monitoring, and encouraged to join the pregnancy exposure registry, which was created after this procedure concluded, and that ensure treatment is discontinued, and the patient should, of course, always liaise with the doctors in case she believes her multiple sclerosis is getting worse after stopping treatment. So thank you for your attention. I believe this was my last slide. If we can move to the next one, and I'll be happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Maria. This was another very interesting presentation highlighting how things that might be simple or straightforward in theory then become complex in practice, and how these have been dealt with. I hope we have given the audience an idea of how these things can be, these kind of issues can be tackled. I would like to give the floor to the audience, to the participants. I would hope that you have some curiosity, something to add, comments. We have 3 panelists who are available. They're the specialists here at EMA on risk management plan. So I hope someone will take the occasion to ask a question or to make a comment on what we have heard today. Is there anyone who wants to participate? It doesn't seem to be the case. Yeah.
Hi.
Yes. Hi, Mario.
Perhaps I wanted to go back to Maria Giovanna's presentation and what the description of the additional risk minimization measures, and perhaps it'd be interesting for colleagues online to understand whether or not, and if not, why the PRAC did not decide to implement additional risk minimization measures for the partners of women and girls taking Valproate, and conversely about any additional risk minimization measures when the patient is male and his female partner could, of course, become pregnant. So in some cases, obviously, these additional risk minimization measures go both ways for the partner and for the patient. But then we have a few combinations depending on which gender the patient is. So Maria Giovanna, perhaps if you can clarify what discussions were ongoing at the level of PRAC at the time. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you very much for this question. Indeed, obviously there was a focus on females. However, a discussion about male patients also took place, and let's say the evidence that PRAC collected was quite limited. So on the transmission of valproate via seminal fluid, let's say that the information was not much, and it seems, based on the limited data, that the amount of valproate present in the semen appeared to be very low. Therefore, no conclusion really could be made. The effect could probably be considered negligible. This was highlighted in the PRAC assessment report. However, for sure, further research is needed, and in such regards, among the studies that have been imposed to the MAH is in the framework of the referral. There is a category 1, a retrospective study to investigate the association between paternal exposure to valproate and the risk of congenital abnormalities, neurodevelopmental disorder, including autism spectrum disorders. So I would say we might have to watch the space. But indeed, the matter was raised from the public at the hearing, at the stakeholder meeting, and an in-depth review has been performed based on, I would say, still limited data.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple of questions coming in the chat. The first one is, could you please tell us what additional risk management measures or pharmacovigilance activities have you considered for fingolimod generic products? Is it possible to answer this question?
Yes, thank you, Ricardo. Indeed, so for the generic products, we have the similar set of additional risk minimization measures, and these include a physician's checklist, a patient caregiver parent guide, depending, of course, on the age of the patient, and a pregnancy-specific patient reminder card. So the measures are similar to the ones we have for the originator. In terms of the additional pharmacovigilance activities, PROC at the time decided not to implement a registry also for the generics. However, patients are still advised to join the registry that was created by the originator, and the decision was done in the remit, so we wouldn't have multiple registries tackling the same information. So patients are still advised to join the originator. And in terms of routine pharmacovigilance activities, we also have data collected as part of the PSUR. So generic companies are required to submit PSUR so we can have data collected in the same remit. I hope this answers the question, but happy to follow up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Another question is it acceptable to use e-distribution for Dhpc as risk management measures tools in the same way in non-EU countries if we are not sure that there is the same level of security and validated computer systems in the healthcare institutions to which it is sent? For example, most doctors use private email addresses. Yeah. Yeah, I understand this is a bit difficult question, but even an opinion, I think, from specialists would be very, very appreciated.
Maybe
Anyone
I can
wants to take it. Yeah.
I can start and then colleagues do complement. As Ricardo said, this is a very difficult question for us to answer. I think here the first and main step would be to have an open discussion with the national competent authorities from your own member state, just to understand how much it can be done. Of course, we always want to ensure that information reaches the target, being the healthcare professional, a doctor, a pharmacist, or the patient, if indeed it's target for them. So I think if we have an open communication and ensure the information reaches it, which is our main target. I don't know if colleagues want to add anything else, just maybe to highlight that in terms of what we do within the EMA, the Dhpcs are now published in our website, so they are made available there. So in case you need to make reference, it can also be a good platform to make a reference to. And I will stop here. Thank you.
Anyone wants to add? Yeah, Marin, I thought of
yeah,
you.
This is really a difficult one to tackle on, and it differs from country to another. The question really is, what is the best way that what's the best channel to use that so that the message reaches the recipient? So let's say that's the GP. And I remember in the days when I was working in HALMED, we were trying to use all sorts of visual differentiation on the envelopes being sent to the doctors so that they can actually read the communication being sent to them, because they at the time had no awareness of what the agency itself did. So when they saw something about agency and the medicines, they thought it was some kind of marketing material. So that was the problem with the paper materials. And on the other hand, email communication doesn't mean that the GP, for instance, will open it because they're too busy with their patients, and it reach them on time. And then in some member states, there were ideas, I know in Croatia was so that the existing, or at the time, again, the system of e-prescriptions also be included a module for communication with the prescribers, where they, when they open their system, would get a prompt that some kind of additional risk minimization, some Dhpc is being sent to them. The problem with risk minimization measures is how and if you can validate them or be sure that they read it, they understood it, and that their knowledge has changed. So if that criteria cannot be met, then that channel of communication should be dropped. Especially because that's what GVP says, and so it's in our guidelines. Any risk minimization measure has to be subjected later on to measurements of effectiveness of those measures. So if we upfront know that we will not be able to measure how effective they are according to those few criteria that I've mentioned, then I wouldn't be really recommending to use those channels. It's a difficult one. The best one seems to be a system that the healthcare professionals are using daily and that prompts them, but from my experience, that proved to be very difficult to implement because healthcare systems are huge, and even making such a tweak to inform healthcare professionals like that requires huge financial burden. So yeah, it's not a straight answer. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you very much, Marin. Of course, yeah, this is a difficult one. If anyone wants to follow up or give any opinion, even please do in the chat or take the floor. There is another. We're getting some other questions. Another one on Valproate. Do you maybe have some interim results of a risk management measure effectiveness, I believe, on use of patient-informed consent and annual acknowledged form in routine medical practice by doctors in different EU member states? Is there in some member states these measures introduced in national treatment disease guidelines for epilepsy and bipolar disorders, e.g. Annual check? Maybe Maria Giovanna?
Okay, I am looking at the chat. So if I can start from the interim results of the additional risk minimization measures and the annual risk acknowledgement form. Yes, as I mentioned, a drug utilization study is ongoing, and the survey among healthcare professional and patient has been completed. So unfortunately, this information has not been published yet. In one of my last slides, I refer to a survey conducted by Epilepsy in Ireland and a study funded by EMA. Specifically on the annual risk acknowledgement form, different comments. Some prescribers considered it as very effective, and the fact that the patient signed it off is a reassurance that there has been an understanding and a detailed conversation. Some prescribers have considered it as an increase in bureaucracy, so they were not fond of it. Some patients have expressed that the most powerful component of all the risk minimization measure was actually the verbal discussion with the prescriber. So there was a high trust in the specialist, and therefore they said, why do we need to sign a form? Sometimes they refused it. Also, there is the role of the pharmacist to be taken into account in order to deliver the information. It seems the verbal communication is still quite powerful. So I would say different views among this form. However, the survey in Epilepsy Island is, how can I say, a one-time analysis conducted in a limited sample of patients and healthcare professionals just in one member state. The EMA-funded study, again, was a survey, a cross-sectional survey. So we might need to take this information with a pinch of salt. We might need to look for more data. Let's say that this form includes a checklist. It is quite powerful, and the set of questions obviously are key ultimately for the patient informed decision. I'm afraid I cannot really say much more because we are still waiting for answers about that. I hope I have addressed at least partially your question. I'm reading the chat to see which were the other ones. Is there some member state measure introduced?
The next question is there any system introduced in any member state to ensure that all appropriate measures have been performed prior to the Valproate being dispensed to patient?
Well, a very good question. So the precise content, the format, and the distribution modalities of the risk minimization measure, all the measures that I have highlighted are under the remit of each NCA. So differences are applied. In some member states, there has been a lot of paper distribution or complemented via electronic distributions. It also depends what the public wishes. Internet is quite powerful, so educational material disseminated via the the health authority website is also key. I don't know if my colleagues wanted to complement. We cannot provide one answer that would fit all member states, really.
I guess this is an example of competencies that are still with member states. Not everyone, of course, is centralized or under the EMA remit. A lot is still done at national level, and this is an example of it, I believe. But Marin, Maria, if you want to add, please, actually.
Thank you, Riccardo. Marin, maybe I start and then you complement. No, just to say that we have a very good example from Ireland, the one Maria Giovanna was just mentioning. But yes, at this point in time, it's, as you were saying, a lot depending on the member states, how they would envision the materials to be circulated and the specific modalities. Thank you.
Marin, anything to add?
No, nothing to add really on this topic.
Okay. At the moment, we don't have any other question on the chat. Is there anything anyone wants from the audience wants to add? Even comments, ideas will be very, very welcome. If you do, please put them in the chat. I can see some thank you, which are of course very appreciated. Marin, Maria Giovanna, do you have anything you want to add before we close, unless we get any other question?
If I may, on behalf of the three of us, we would be quite curious in reverting a question to you. We have spoken about evaluation of the effectiveness of risk minimization measures. There have been discussion, thoughts about which could be the barrier to overcome to ensure the message finally reach the target audience. So we would like to ask you, which do you think could be the barriers for each recipient of the educational materials, and depending on the specificities of your countries, we would be very keen to hear from you. Thanks.
Please take the floor or put a comment on the chat, or otherwise this can be done, I guess, after the meeting. Maria Giovanna you can contact her after the meeting. If there is no other question, and if we have covered everything we wanted to cover, I think we can close this meeting. I just want to close with repeating what I have already said before. I mean, this has been a very, very busy time, and our speakers and panelists, they have put together 2 webinars for us, the 3 of them, one in April and one today. So I just want to say a big thank you to the 3 of you on behalf of International Affairs. Thank you very much. And I just, last thing I want to say is expressing a wish that next year we can meet face to face, maybe in Amsterdam or somewhere else, if the pandemic situation allows. We are working towards it. Thank you very much to everyone, to the speakers and to the participants. And last but not least, to Cleman and Sandra, who are behind the scenes, but they have made it possible technically and working really a lot in preparing all these webinars we've had last year and this year. Thank you very much.